Hi everyone, this is Nijaz Nihal. Today I am going to talk about the famous management concept Hawthorne theory, and it was done by Professor George Elton Mayo. Professor George Elton Mayo has secured fame as the leader in a series of experiments which became one of the great turning points in management thinking. At the Hawthorne plant of Western Electric, he discovered that job satisfaction increased through employee participation in decisions rather than through short-term incentives. Mayo's importance to management lies in the fact that he established evidence on the value of a management approach and style which, although not necessarily an alternative to F.W. Taylor's scientific management, presented facts which Taylorities could not ignore. The Hawthorne plant of Western Electric was located in Chicago. It had some 29,000 employees and manufactured telephones and telephone equipment, principally for AT&T. The company had a reputation for advanced personnel policies and had welcomed a research study by the National Research Council into the relationship between workplace lighting and individual efficiency. The study began in 1924 by isolating two groups of workers in order to experiment with the impact of various incentives on their productivity. Improvements to levels of lighting produced increases in productivity, but so too did reversion to standard lighting and even below standards lighting in both groups. The initial assumptions therefore was that increased output stemmed from variation alone. Other incentives including payment incentives and rest pauses were manipulated at regular intervals, and although output levels varied, the trend was inexorably upwards. Whatever experimentation was applied, output went up, although it had been fairly conclusively determined that lighting had little or nothing to do with output levels. The assistant works manager George Pennock agreed that something peculiar was going on and that experimentation should continue. In the winter of 1927, Pennock invited Claire Turner to consult. Turner quickly resolved that rest pauses in themselves were not the cause for increased output, although it was observed that longer rest pauses gave rise to more social interaction, which in turn impacted on mental attitudes. Turner attributed the rise in output to the small group, the type of supervision, earnings, the novelty of the experiment, and the increased attention to the experimentees generated by the experiment itself. Pennock had been among the first to note that supervisory style was important. The supervisor involved in the illumination experiment had been relaxed and friendly. He got to know the operators well and was not too worried about company policies and procedures. Discipline was secured through enlightened leadership and understanding, and an esprit de corps grew up within the group. This was in stark contrast to standard practice before the experiment. When Pennock invited Turner to participate, he also invited Mayo, although it is unknown whether this was as a result of Mayo's achievements at the Philadelphian spinning mill or because of a desire to involve Harvard. Visits in 1929 and 1930 indicated to Mayo's remarkable change in attitude in the group. Mayo's view was that the test room workers had turned into a social unit, enjoying all the attention that were getting, and had developed a sense of participation in the project. In order to understand this further, Mayo instituted a series of interviews. These provided the workers with an opportunity to express their views and let out steam. It emerged that they would feel better for discussing a situation even if it did not change. Further exploration into worker complaints revealed that some had a little or no basis in fact but were actually symptoms or indicators of personal situations causing distress. By focusing on a more open conversational listening and caring interview approach, Mayo had struck a key which linked the style of supervision and the level of morale to levels of productivity. A third stage in the research program took place in the bank wiring room with a similar application of incentives to productivity. Here, it emerged that output was restricted. The group had a standard for output which was respected by individuals in the group. The group was different to the employer's financial incentive scheme. The group developed a code of behavior of its own based on solidarity in opposition to the management. and output was determined by informal social groups rather than by management. Mayo had read the work of F.W. Taylor, who had already established that social groups were capable of exercising very strong control over the work behavior of individual members. Taylor had referred to this as systematic soldiering. The interesting development which Mayo noted, however, was that whereas in the first set of experiments, productivity went up as the experiments progressed, in the bank wiring room, productivity was restricted. For industry to benefit from the experiments at Hawthorne, Mayo first concluded that supervisors needed training in understanding the personal problems of workers and also in listening and interviewing techniques. He held that the new supervisor should be less aloof, more people oriented, more concerned and skilled in handling personal and social situations. It was only later, after a period of reflection, that Mayo was able to conclude that job satisfaction increased as workers were given more freedom to determine the conditions of their working environment and to set their own standards of output. Intensified interaction and cooperation created a high level of cohesion. Job satisfaction and output depended more on cooperation and a feeling of worth than on physical working conditions. In Mayo's view, workers had been unable to find satisfactory outlets for expressing personal problems and dissatisfaction in their work life. The problem, as Mayo perceived it, was that managers thought the answers to industrial problems resided in technical efficiency, when actually the answer was a human and social one. Mayo's contribution lies in recognition from the Hawthorne experiments that the formality of strict rules and procedures bonds informal approaches and groups with their base in human emotions, sentiments, problems and interactions. The manager therefore should strive for an equilibrium between the technical organization and the human one, and hence should develop skills in handling human relations and situations. These include diagnostic skills and understanding human behavior and interpersonal skill in counseling, motivating, leading and communicating.